We have all cried in our lives. Different sad events, losses, disappointments that have brought us to tears. But what have you done with your tears? Especially ones that come from a deep agony, distress within our souls. Sadness can break us, can demoralize us, can paralyze us, but it also can help us grow. It can motivate us. It can serve as a wake-up call. In many ways, you can define your life not just by the happy times, but how you behave in despondent moments, in times when you're challenged, when things aren't going your way. Yes, how you channel your tears. Being that it's inevitable in our lives that we will have our ups and downs, it's critical to look at yourself, especially in those moments. So please join me in this important conversation. Tears as seeds. The soul's journey through pain to purpose. Hi, this is Simon Jacobson, and we'll be speaking about tears as seeds, the soul's journey through pain to purpose. This program is dedicated by Simon Gruzman in memory of Polina Nagelnik. It's inevitable in life that we will have low moments, meaning times when we may even cry. Sad events, tragic events, losses, disappointments that bring us to tears. Because life at the end of the day is a cycle. And the wheel turns. At times we're on the top, at times we're at the bottom. But the wheel is always turning. That's the story and the narrative of life. Never see your life as just one frame, one chapter. It's part of a larger narrative. But what will define your life, above all, will be how you deal with setbacks, with challenges, with difficult moments. Yes, how you will channel your tears. Our tears, our weeping, can demoralize us. It can break us. It can cause us to be bitter, resentful, angry. But it could also serve as seeds for growth. Remember, tears are drops. On one hand, yes, they're a bit salty, but raindrops cause things to grow. Why should tears not be turned into raindrops? So let's discuss how we do that. But above all, I want to begin by blessing each one of you, myself included, that we should have the least amount of events in our lives that cause us to cry. They should only be tears of joy. But should we encounter, and we will inevitably encounter, moments that bring us to tears, let's discuss how they can be harnessed, how they can be turned into seeds of growth. To do that, we need to really dig a bit deeper, and let's dissect the anatomy of life's experiences. As I mentioned, life by definition, because it's mobile, because we're on the move. If there's love, there's going to be moments that will challenge our love. That's what emotions are like. Computers, machines, like rocks, don't go through emotional vicissitudes, ups and downs. But a human being who has emotions that are alive, the more alive they are, the more rocky they're going to be. When I say rocky, I don't necessarily mean extremes, but it means that there will be changes. They'll be subject to change. Like the cardiogram, a wave, that's life. A pulse, pulsating motion. So inevitably, there are ups and there are downs. You exhale, you inhale. The heart contracts and expands. Now, of course, there's a certain gravitation to comfort zones where you just want things to be stable, predictable. But that's not really capturing, we'll call it the marrow, the energy of life. Energy is about adventure. Energy is about spontaneity. It's about shifts and changes. The key is navigating them. Not that we don't want the changes. We want to navigate them. And when you navigate them, it changes the whole picture. So, of course, the billion-dollar question, why is there pain in the first place? Why do bad things happen to good people? Why do we need to suffer? Why is it so much part of the human experience? And there's no complete and adequate answer for that. Yes, there are philosophical answers and explanations, but at the end of the day, precisely because it's an emotional question, the most brilliant mind cannot speak to a crying heart, and I'm specifically saying crying, or bleeding heart. Because it's an emotional expression when you cry out in exasperation or in pain. You're not looking for an answer. You're looking for recognition. You're looking for strength. I always say this to people. When people are going through difficult moments, they're not looking for answers. They're looking for strength, empowerment. So when we look at the bigger picture, we have to see it this way. As I mentioned, life is a journey. Never look at your life as segmented chapters or frames, but it's an ongoing narrative. Just look back at your life. Could you have predicted everything that led you to where you are today? Some of the twists and turns at the time may have been inexplicable, and now you look back and you say, it led me to this and this place. And we're still in the middle of the journey, so there's many things to come. So it's being open and recognizing that we're not in control of everything. You control how you navigate, but you don't control the ups and downs. You don't control the twists and turns. So when you really think about the question of pain and suffering, the real question has to be one of purpose. Because when things are going well, we usually don't ask the question, why are things going well? That's the nature of a human being. When things are going well, we take it for granted. When do we ask questions when things are not going well? In many ways, as I often cite the verse in the book of Job, very powerful, I'll paraphrase. Job, the classic sufferer, is saying to God, why? And God, paraphrasing, says to him, you ask me these questions, why good people suffer, why there's pain in the world. Were you there when I created it all, that you asked me this question? In other words, were you there at the outset, when it was all planned? You've come in the middle of the narrative, in the middle of the story. And to elaborate, again, paraphrasing, you ask me why things are not working, why things are painful. But you ask me why there's joy in the world? You ask me about death. You ask me why there's life? Because it goes hand in hand. The real question has to be, why is there life, period? Why is there existence? Then you can say, why is this existence a painful one or a joyous one or a joyful one? So one of the key things to keep in mind, yes, when things are going well, we don't really ask why. And that's why often when we take those things for granted, and actually does not necessarily lead to growth. It could lead, and for many people it does. But it doesn't compel you. When it comes to pain, it's very difficult to remain complacent. Because pain by definition is uncomfortable. So it itself is egging you on. It's making you, it's disturbing you. It's a disruption, a disturbance, a turbulence. Now, it could be a turbulence that breaks you down, God forbid, and demoralizes and hurts you and doesn't allow you to move. Or it could be a turbulence that shakes you up, that serves as a wake-up call. Because at the end of the day, that is pain. Why do we have nerves in the first place? They warn us. They're a red flag. They're a wake-up call telling us there's something going on that's not aligned. Do something about it. It's like an early warning signal. Now, of course we don't like the pain. That's why we'll do something. People talk about how annoying it is to hear a child cry. That's precisely the reason. Because if it wasn't annoying, you would ignore it. It's telling you something's wrong. When you see it that way, then it's a stepping stone. And indeed, it can become a wake-up call to become a seed. So every tear becomes a seed. And it becomes a journey indeed, through pain to purpose. So it forces us to ask the question, why am I here? Again, when things are going well, we usually don't ask that question. You walk down the street, you're going to work, you're enjoying life, everything is going smoothly. Suddenly something's not working, you start asking, why? That's good. It's forcing you to ask a question called why. Now, the why could end up being a question that just immobilizes you. Why? And that's it. I'm stuck. Or it could be a why. Why am I here? Why am I going through this? What am I learning from it? How will I grow through the process? That's how healthy people deal with pain and suffering, with tears and sadness. They'll always see it as a step towards something greater. The tear will always become a seed. Tears will become seeds. Now, it would be a lot easier if we just experienced animal bliss. Imagine you can just lie in a beach chair and do nothing, with nary a worry in the world. Your bills are being paid. All your physical and existential needs are being filled. Everything is fine. How long can you survive in that position? Now, some people dream of it. But once you start doing it, you tell me. Because the human spirit is too restless for that type of animal bliss. I have met people who have challenged this premise simply in their behavior, who have grown up with tremendous wealth and literally have, when they wake up, have no reason to accomplish anything. They don't need to be productive. They don't need to build anything. I remember one such individual who basically traveled the world on yachts, on sailboats. He loved the ocean, he loved the sea. He was so sunburned, you couldn't tell what color his real natural skin was. And he seemed happy-go-lucky. A very sweet guy. After a while, getting to know him a bit more, I would cry for him. I wish he had cried a bit. I cried for him because he was so sweet. But he never was challenged. Completely spoiled. And I don't mean that necessarily in a bad way. He wasn't particularly arrogant. He wasn't particularly abusive. But he would never have to develop. He never had to spread his wings. He was essentially, when I met him, a 50, 60-year-old, 10-year-old. A 10-year-old in a 60-year-old body. Traveled the world many times, and literally not one day of his life had to produce anything. What bothered me, what challenged me was, how could he be happy? How is he managing? And he figured it out. I can't tell you internally how he was managing, but he figured out, he got himself busy with things, and it looked like he was busy. But I knew that it was not driven by anything. He had no deadlines and no goals and so on. Just mentioning because it always intrigued me. Because we know human beings created to produce. By nature, animal bliss doesn't work for us. The spirit is too restless. Now, I believe he was in deep pain. But sometimes the deepest pain is not even felt. You know, when the nerves become so frayed, you don't even feel pain. When you're feeling pain, it's a sign at least the nerves are alive. But I don't want to talk about him. I just wanted to use it as a case study, as an example. So if a person is aware, is sensitive, there's going to be times when let's talk about someone who has that animal bliss, will not be satisfied. The pain will be caused by the fact that you have no challenge. Even though when you're challenged, you'd love to be sitting on the beach. That is part of the cycle of life, the wave. And that is the journey. It truly is a journey. Like they say, when it comes to pain, the only way out is through. And hence the journey through pain to purpose. I remember when speaking in South Africa, I was speaking to, sadly, it was a group of individuals who had suffered unnatural tragedies, loss of children, loss of a spouse, accidents, things they were not prepared for. And they had asked me to spend an afternoon with them, and I did. It was very moving for me. First of all, watching the people, literally martyrs, people who really went through things unimaginable. And I remember saying, part of my presentation was, we don't really have an answer for pain. Because like I said, the most brilliant mind cannot speak to a bleeding heart. What we do is we try to find not why it happened, but what we can do about it. How to navigate. How to grow through it. And yes, how those tears can become seeds to greater heights. To reach and achieve greater heights. A woman came up to me afterwards. It was very touching. She was in tears, shared some of her story. And she said, I don't agree with you. I know where you're coming from. But as someone who did suffer, I did come to discover why. The why was for me to build something in the name of my child, my son. They lost a son, I believe, at the late teens, 17 or 18. That was the why. And if you asked me, I wouldn't have it any other way. That's what she said. I couldn't believe it. That if I could rewrite the script, that was what was meant to be. I didn't challenge her, obviously. I respected her sacred space and her sacred right. But I thought about it a lot. And she has the full right to do so. I still would say what I would say because I, who's someone who has been blessed not to go through anything like that, thank God, my view on it is I don't have an answer for you. But if you found an answer, that's not just what to do about it or how to grow, but there's even a why, I honor that with everything, obviously. What was fascinating to me, and I mean that in an emotional way, not an intellectual way, was the very idea that she found purpose in this terrible tragedy. And the purpose became the why for her. So it's not like she wouldn't want her son back. That's not what she was saying. She was saying that the purpose I discovered from it made me understand why I'm here in this world and maybe why I had this son in the first place. I found that to be so powerful, such a peaceful place in a way, ironically. But it's like discovering real purpose. And where did it come from? Something that she did not want, nobody wants in their lives. So purpose can be found in many ways. And we're not just talking about philosophical and theological and conceptual. We're talking about really experiencing something that you feel becomes your purpose in your life. 24/7, you breathe it. And that's what came to this woman. And then I started recognizing there are others that have gone through similar experiences. And they find that purpose. That's where tears become true seeds. So we don't ask for it. And we don't welcome it. And we kick and scream, frankly. And we have a right to do so. But that doesn't make our lives less purposeful. It becomes part of our purpose, part of our journey. I remember years ago giving my weekly class. This class is to give it on location in New York City. And there was an individual who started coming to the class. He had never studied any Judaism, any Torah. And he began to start reading. He heard me quote the chapter every week as a chapter in the Torah that corresponds 52 weeks in the year. Have 52 chapters. Each one we live with the times, meaning the chapter teaches us the soul energy of that particular time. Each week has 7 days. Each chapter of the Torah has 7 parts. So he began reading the Torah week after week. I didn't know about it at the time. After a while, maybe close to a year later, he lets me know, I've been reading and I'm coming to the conclusion, which we conclude traditionally at the end of the holiday season, Simchas Torah, and that leads us to the new cycle of the Torah reading, that's the Shabbos Bereshis. Okay. And then he comes to me and says, I just finished reading it, and I'm very, very disturbed. Why is he disturbed? He says, the story is it's amazing story of life. Begins with the story of creation and the story of good and evil and choices people make and the sins and the good people and the evil people and the battles, selfishness, finding purpose. He said, I really learned tremendous about life. Then, of course, the story continues after we read the book of Genesis, book of Exodus, after the Jews had suffered 210 years in a bitter exile in Egypt. They finally are freed. And they begin their journey. They receive the Torah at Sinai. They then build a sanctuary, the service in the sanctuary, and then the journey. Their 40-year-long journey in the Sinai wilderness. An arduous journey, a difficult one, in an arid, hostile land. And finally come to the promised land. And there too, there are many ups and downs. Their dialogues, their constant haggling and battling with God. Finally, you read the end, and I think I'm coming to a happy ending. They end up on the east river, the east bank, I should say, of the river Jordan. And that's that. And Moses dies, and all the people of that generation die except Joshua and Caleb. And I said to myself, what kind of ending is this? It's anticlimactic. Everything is going to the promised land. I was convinced, the last sentence, they enter the promised land. And I end up seeing that the entire chapter, 2 chapters, are almost completely about journeys. Elamase, we just concluded. We're just concluding the 4th book of Numbers that concludes with the journeys. The 42 journeys in this 40-year journey was 42 stops that they made. And it's not pleasant. You'd think this book, the Bible, the Torah, has all the answers to life's secrets. They're never satisfied. Whatever God does for them, they have another complaint. And it was interesting, coming from someone who had never read the Torah before. It was very fresh. And he gave me this fresh perspective, something I was used to. I read this every year, my entire life. And I said to him, you know what? You're right. Because the Torah is not a a touchy-feely book. It's not a book that it's here to make you feel good. It's not entertainment. It's the book of life. And life is exactly that, the ups and downs and disappointments. And it doesn't always work, and it's not predictable. And it doesn't necessarily have a happy ending. Ultimately, yes, it does. It's a life of journeys. It's a journey. And I remember he listened to me and said, wow, that's powerful. And I said, you just went through that journey. And we all go through that journey in life. And part of it, yes, is beautiful and pleasant. And maybe we have the most of that. But sometimes there are setbacks, and sometimes there are twists and turns, and sometimes there are tears. But those tears become seeds of growth. That's the story. And you're continuing to tell the story. You're continuing to play out the story. And we continue to be players, not bystanders, not observers, but we're actually part of writing the unfolding drama of our own destinies in how we react to these ups and downs of life, and especially to those tears, those sad moments. We are now in the 9 days, the saddest time of the Jewish calendar, leading up to the saddest day, Tisha B'Av, when the destruction of the temple, and many tears have been shed. B'chia l'doros is an expression. Tears for generations that were shed. But the tears ultimately became seeds, raindrops of tremendous growth. And that's the option and the choice, the options and the choice we each have. And to come to that point, you have to look back at the bigger picture. When you're in the throes of pain, while you're crying, it's very difficult to see. But before you do, you look at it, you realize those that sow in tears will reap in joy. That the tears too can become part of the catalyst, the springboard, that leads us to tremendous growth. But to do so, you need to recognize that there's a purpose to your life. You're not just here to enjoy the bounty, to eat of the fruits of the land. You're here to fulfill a unique mission. And that mission includes many things in life, including the challenges, including the tears, and transforming them into growth. When you can embrace that, your life becomes a different story. It's then a narrative of purpose and a journey that takes us in many different directions to get to that purpose. And yes, we do enter ultimately the promised land, but we need to go through the journey. The journey is the key, because the journey is how you navigate. You don't just want to enter into a promised land as a gift. You want it to be a product, a result of the prices you paid, of the dues you paid through your journey to get to that place. Because a big part of the destination is the journey. But a journey that does take us ultimately to the promised land. May every one of us be blessed with the least amount of aggravation, the least amount of tears, but when they do come our way, to recognize they're not just to be shed aside, they're part of the blessing, they're part of the narrative, they're part of helping us cross the threshold into a world where we will experience total harmony and peace. But we will have paid the dues, we will have paid our dues, we will have paid the prices that led us there. This has been Simon Jacobson. MeaningfulLife.com is we'll call it our home online, our repository where you can find many resources. Please subscribe to our offerings, subscribe to our YouTube channel. If this message was meaningful, please share it with others. And I'd love to hear your feedback, your comments, and thoughts. Be blessed and be well.
This program is brought to you by the Meaningful Life Center. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at meaningfullife.com/donate. This program is brought to you by the Meaningful Life Center. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at meaningfullife.com/donate.